This is the 217 Recovery Podcast with Corey Winfield.
You know, when people reach out and ask for help and it's something as simple as, hey, shipping her a box of tampons.
The one thing about this girl is she's never asked me for anything. She may have hinted about tampons.
July 9th, 2020. This is the 217 Recovery Podcast. My name is Corey Winfield. Joining me on the phone today, friend of the show, Courntey Quick. Courtney, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. And thank you for not chewing gum this time. You were on with us last winter, and my boss...
Gotta embarrass me like that.
Yeah, my boss told me, he's like, hey, if you interview people next time, maybe have them spit out the gum first. And I was like, okay.
You're horrible.
I know, because I don't have a boss. But no, I appreciate, not hearing the gum smack this time. You've come a long way in your podcast interviewing skills. So
thanks.
Give you props on that. So you work for Skywood Recovery. What is your job title there?
I am the business development representative for Northern Michigan.
Ah. So even though Skywood Recovery is in Augusta, you're up in Northern Michigan, kind of trying to spread the word, I guess, right?
Yep. So we live in Northern Michigan, and my territory is from Saginaw all the way up to the UP into Wisconsin, and then I do cover some of Minnesota as well.
How's that going for you?
Well, everything right now with COVID is pretty much phone calls and Zoom meetings anyway, so it doesn't really matter where you live.
Yeah, and so people, do they call you directly wanting treatment, or are you reaching out to treatment centers saying, hey, if people are trying to get in and you guys are full, maybe reach out to us and we have contacts? And is it more of that kind of, which one is it? Both?
A little bit of everything. Main part of what I do is a lot of networking, creating name awareness for Skywood, letting other facilities, whether it be treatment facilities, professionals, social workers, caseworkers, therapists in private practices, or even the social workers in the hospitals, just reaching out to them and letting them know about Skywood and the benefits of and the resources that Skywood offers and how we can help manage either if they have a patient that is looking to admit to Skywood, or if they're just looking for a place for their patients to go. A lot of times there's a wait list for a lot of different facilities throughout Michigan, and just to be able to reach out to somebody to be like, hey, I have this patient with XYZ. Where do you think the best fit for this patient is? They want to travel, they don't want to travel. And being that there's 4 of us in Michigan, we really have our hands in a lot of different pots as far as treatment facilities and knowing what insurances they accept, along with, if they're dual diagnosis, if they're not dual diagnosis, and what their wait times are. So we can really help facilitate those patients on a quicker path to treatment facilities.
And you mentioned dual diagnosis, which I think is a huge thing. And if someone's looking to get into treatment, I recommend dual diagnosis. Myself, I first thought that I just had a drinking problem, and then I thought I was crazy, and then I realized, hey, it's a little bit of both. And that's what dual diagnosis kind of does. It treats the substance use disorder, and it also treats the damage that you've done to your brain. And without the dual diagnosis, in my personal and professional opinion as radio broadcaster, believe that it's just going to be so much harder for you, until you can kind of lock them both down and understand that there's two sides of it. Yes, your body is physically, or at least in my case, was physically dependent on the alcohol. I needed it to function, and that, as sad as that is, that's the truth. And also the mental toll and the depression, not drinking causes depression. Drinking worsens depression. So, I had to kind of come out of that and then to realize, I can take this certain pill that will help my serotonin levels, and and it'll kind of help balance me out instead of like a hard crash. And I didn't have to be on that stuff for life. You know, I'm not on it anymore. And I went to the doctor yesterday, and she was wanting to put me on some stuff for some other thing. And I'm like, wait a minute, isn't Wellbutrin for depression? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, see, I'm good right now on my mental. You know, like I don't really want to mess with stuff that's going to, you know, maybe throw me off, or I don't know. I'm good right now, so I didn't want to mess with it. But talk to your doctors, though. This is what I would recommend. You know, talk to your doctor and look for facilities that are dual diagnosis. And Skywood Recovery is, correct?
Yes, we are credentialed. We are one of the very few in the U.S. actually that is credentialed to be a dual diagnosis treatment facility. We are primary substance abuse, secondary mental health. So, but being that our medical director is a psychiatrist, it gives us that capability of being able to be dual diagnosis.
Cool. So if somebody did come in and they're like, hey, look, you know, maybe, and I'm not going to start naming off pills, but they're like, hey, you know, maybe this is what you need, a little bit of this, and that'll help. And then they'll explain it to you. And that just makes a world of difference as opposed to going to a place and they're like, wow, here's what you got to learn about yourself. You know, like that whole other side's not being even touched on. And that's just sad, my opinion.
Well, and then also, you know, as soon as the patient steps foot in our door, we start working on their aftercare as well, what their aftercare program is going to look like. And, you know, because the last thing we want to do is be like, okay, your residential is all done, you can go back to life. Like, that's not going to work. So, you know, we make sure that the patients are all set up with, if they need a psychiatrist, or because their primary care doctor can't manage the medications because of all the rules and regulations the state has on them now. So if the patient needs a psychiatrist, we make sure that they have one. If they need a therapist, we make sure that they have one. If they need a primary care, if they need an IOP, if they need any of that stuff, we make sure all those boxes are checked before they leave our facility. You know, the last thing you want to do is throw somebody back out into the real world and be like, here you go, you can go figure it out now, because there's no success in that story. So it's very important for us to make sure that the patients are set up appropriately before they leave our facility.
And the average stay, or the recommended stay, is probably, what, a month?
Average stay from an insurance standpoint is typically about 30 days.
Okay, which in my opinion is not long enough, and that's why you have to go through, you know, the therapy afterward as well, you know, and you have to do the things that you have to do. You're going to feel so great when you leave treatment. I felt like, oh, I had the world by the balls, and then reality starts setting in, and I get the disconnection notice, and it's right back to the same thing, and right back to the same thinking, like, well, electric bill's $140, I got $98, I might as well just go buy a bunch of liquor and wait, you know, and that's not the way you want to run your life or go about business, you know. But in early recovery, trying to do some of that stuff can be overwhelming. So, you know, to have something set up and just kind of prepare for those bad moments as best as you can, and then pray for the best, I guess. I'm not sure how that saying goes.
A lot of people don't also understand that there's different levels of care. And levels of care are very important when it comes to treatment and also insurance needs. So the different levels of care, you know, you're going to start at your detox, and then you move to your residential. And then after residential, if you still need another step down, it's called partial hospitalization program, or a PHP. And that still allows you to, that allows you to live in an area, you know, what we call cabins on our facility, but learn to have a little bit more freedom. So you get more freedom to go to the store, to do other activities, to have more TV use. And then from the partial hospitalization program, you step down into an IOP, which is an intensive outpatient therapy program. And, you know, you go to therapy, you know, 2-3 times a week. You go to groups. And typically, if you're in an IOP, you're also living in a sober living house. And to anybody out there that's listening that's going to treatment, if you're in residential and you're stepping out of residential, I highly, hands down, recommend you go to a sober living house. I think that the benefits of you transitioning into a sober living house to learn how to relive in sobriety is huge. You know, if you're not surrounded by people that know and understand what you're going through as you're trying to transition back into a sober life, then you don't have that connection with people. And so I think that's a huge benefit. You know, you continue an IOP, you live in sober living, you complete that program. Okay, so now maybe I'm ready to step back into a normal living situation. Correct me if I'm wrong, Courtney, but I know that you have been through this. And what I've seen from the outside looking in is that the success rate is so much higher when you move those steps down in the appropriate manner.
They are, and you have to do them right, and you have to make sure you're in the right place. Some sober living houses, they're not certified. Be careful of those. Some don't require you to do anything. You know, I would be very leery of those. Like if you go to a place and you're like, okay, well, what do you want me to do? And they say, oh, well, you just have to go to outpatient.
Well, see, and I think that's another thing that where Skywood or myself steps in, and we'll be like, you know, we've toured all of the sober living houses in Michigan. We know what the requirements are. We know the good ones, the bad ones. You know, we know where the recommendations are, and that's where, you know, we come into play and we say, hey, this is a great sober living program here, or there's another one here, you know, so, and a lot of times the good sober living houses have a wait list. So that's why it's so important for us to start that aftercare program the second that patient walks in the door. Yeah,
because and you and I both agree that Nathan's house in Boyne City is one of the nicest that, you know, I mean, I've lived in some in Grand Rapids where it did not set me up for success. Now, was I right mentally? I don't know. You know, but I would look at, you know, some of the features of the house, like the bathtub falling through the floor and all the furniture being wrapped up in plastic. And I'm like, what's up with that? And they're like, oh, bed bugs. And I'm like, ugh. You know, it didn't make me feel comfortable. It didn't make me feel safe. And then, you know, the people that are going to be in there with you, you can't pick those people. And some of them are full of it and some of them really want it. You know, you got to pick the people to hang out with or to associate with that are on the same page as you in your recovery. And that has to come first. But yeah, if it's just like a flop house, like, oh yeah, they're getting money from the state to keep you here. And well, you just don't have to go to any meeting. I mean, Nathan's house, Jason DeBeck, who's the owner, had told me that they base their program off of the Betty Ford Clinic's program, which is a pretty good little program. And, you know, those are some of the rules. You know, you got to go to 5 meetings a week. You know, you have to get up, get out of bed, make your bed. You know, you have to work a job or you have to volunteer a lot. You know, some people are on either disability or they get a check, and that's fine. But go give back then. You know, don't just sit around the house watching TV. And I didn't hardly ever watch TV when I lived there. I was
in for Freedom in Petoskey. You know, they have the same. You know, they adapted a lot of Jason's rules and regulations and put it into their program. So, you know, that's just another resource as well. You know, that's a women's house, but you know, both of those houses have done a great job.
Yeah, Equip for Freedom is a great, you know, women's. Yeah, it's the same, pretty much the same deal. And you know, I know the women that run that, and they're great people. And actually, we did a podcast with Joyce from the grand opening of their house, the Equip for Freedom house. I think last September, August, July. I don't. It was last year is when we did it, but you can always go back and listen to that one, Courtney, if you want. If you want.
I was talking to Joyce yesterday, so I'm I think both of their programs are great. But I think, you know, when it comes down to it, it's, you know, when you have a patient that reaches out, they're looking for help. The desperation of the family's voices, the desperation of the patient, and giving them the best services that we can, whether we're helping them at Skywood or we're helping them someplace else. That's what's important to us. Monday on my call with the rest of my team, we had a patient that was going into Skywood that had a dog that needed somewhere for this dog to go, and they didn't have anywhere for this dog to go. And one of our BD reps drove to the patient's house and got the dog and took the dog. I don't know where she took the dog, but, you know, that's the next level